Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our CDBG virtual capacity building training for our fiscal year 26 cycle for the Community Development Block Grant, our HUD funded entitlement program. Today, we're going to go through some best practices. We're going to talk about some financial management, some common mistakes that happen during the RFP process, and just answer any questions that you may have. As we are in the cycle, this is the opportunity to ask questions. Otherwise, we are not able to do so until after, after it's all over. So feel free to submit your questions in writing and let's just jump into it. Are we able to share screen?
I will share my
Well,
screen.
thank you. As we're doing that, my name is Rashonda Alexander. I serve as the Director of Compliance for the Community Development Administration for CDA. CDA serves as the clearinghouse of federal funds for the city of St. Louis. Primarily, we administer HUD funds, but as you all very well know, because of the pandemic, we received additional funds from Treasury that we administered through state and local fiscal recovery funds. We also administer EPA brownfield funds and lead program EPA funded through our home repair operation. I'm not able to see the slides just yet,
Okay, here they come.
but
Okay.
we've done our intro. How about we introduce the members of our team who will also be presenting today? Tom, you want to start? And then we can go to the next slide.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Nagel. I'm the Public Information Officer here for CDA. So thank you for joining us. And for everyone that learned about this through our e-newsletter, thank you for subscribing. And just remember, you can always go to CDA's homepage, city's website.gov/CDA, and go ahead and copy and paste your coworkers and friends' emails and plug them into the form right there on CDA's homepage and subscribe them to our e-newsletter. That's how you get all the updates about funding opportunities from CDA and stories about our CDA partners. Thanks for joining.
I am going to just allow that floor when the presenter presents, and we can just move forward from this slide onto the next.
Okay.
So our agenda today, we've welcomed you. We're going to do a quick overview of the cycle. We're going to talk about the 26 RFP at a glance, some CDBG best practices, general requirements and organizational capacity, financial management, and then wrap up with some questions. And so at each of these stages, we will have different presenters on our team that are phenomenal to kind of shepherd you through this process. Next slide. The most important date here is the date of submission. That's September the 5th. This timeline is published on CDA's website. And as you see highlighted today, we are at our virtual capacity building training. Next slide, please. Your ideal funding cycle timeline starts January 1 through December 31st of any given year. And I really want to point out that the first quarter is where your technical assistance visits from your programmatic monitor start. And we are here to help you all the way along the journey. And then our contracts conclude in 2026. I also wanted to share that this is being recorded. So, as it will be a long presentation and workshop, feel free to jump in and out depending on what you need. Like, for example, financial management is going to be the last point that we talk about today. And that will probably happen around 12:30 or so. We're going to be here for a while together, but you can catch the recording later and share with your friends. Next slide. Okay, our CDBG overview, we know that it's a HUD-funded program specifically targeted for those low, moderate income individuals to prevent slum and blight, and then also respond to urgent need. But those are the three primary national objectives for HUD. Next slide. I believe we should be introducing Ben here, who's
Indeed.
going to tell you more about items to remember. And let's just go back a slide. I don't want to take anybody's thunder when we have all of these wonderful people. So Ben, please present
Yes.
CDBG overview, and I'm just going to go off camera. Thank you, everyone. You're in wonderful hands.
Thank you, Rashonda. Good morning. Thank you for attending today's meeting. And my name is Ben. I'm one of the grant administrators here at the CDA, the Community Development Administration. I'll be going through the RFP, the request for proposal, and the various points and documentation which we need from you. Just as an overview, the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG program, provides funds to municipalities and other units of government around the country to develop viable urban communities. This is accomplished by providing affordable, decent housing, creating suitable living environments, and expanding economic opportunities, principally for low and moderate income persons. All activities must be consistent with one or more of the following HUD national objectives. Principally benefits low and moderate income persons, prevents or eliminates slums or blight, and addresses an urgent need or problem in the community, like a national or natural disaster. The next slide, please. Thank you. With the RFP, it's important that you follow the suggestions and requirements to complete the application, but the RFP is now available for download on the CDA website, which, as you can see from the screen, would be www.sanluis-mo.gov/CDBG/2026.CFM. The proposal deadline for the 2026 RFP is 4 p.m. on Friday, September 5. All proposals must be submitted online in Salesforce. Just as a reminder, would be at the online in Salesforce would be at CDA grants, no space, .sanluis-mo.gov. No late applications will be accepted. So make sure you have plenty of time to prepare your answers and put the application in plenty of time before the deadline on the September 5 at 4 p.m. This RFP is for non-profits or municipal entities proposing to conduct non-housing activities. Geographic target areas are designated neighborhood revitalization strategy areas, otherwise known as NRSAS. And there is a map available on the website if you need to consult it. Next slide, please. Again, carrying on with the items to remember, all questions related to the proposal forms, supporting documentation and funding process must be submitted no later than 4 p.m. on August 22nd, 2025, via email at cdbg@sanluis-mo.gov. We're very particular with these dates because there are deadlines to observe from all different sources. So it's the 4 p.m. on August 22nd, 2025. CDA will provide answers in writing and post frequently asked questions and answers on the CDA website. Questions pertaining to Salesforce only may be submitted up to 12 noon on September 1, 2025. Salesforce questions must be submitted via email to CDA grants, no space, at sanluis-mo.gov. No questions will be taken or answered by telephone or by a direct contact with the CDA staff person. Next slide, please. With the RFP, you will be asked to provide a number of documents to verify who you are and if you have licenses and if you basically exactly who you are. And one of these documents is a sam.gov and e-verify. But going back to the requirements, the general requirements are for non-profit capacity, registrations and clearances. We use the EIN, UEI, SAM.gov, E-Verify, and CBI. That's tax verification and license verification with the City of St. Louis. We also require insurance and bonding. There's a particular coverage and limits, and it has to be valid for the period of the contract that you are applying for. Review of key policies and procedures. Things like conflict of interest, non-discrimination, and grievance. We want people to be clear, transparent, so we can have a good business relationship without any hindrance or any obstacles. And the conflict of interest is very much part of the application. The construction requirements, public improvements or facility activities, site control, project schedule, construction budget, photographs, construction resume. We also need design documents, environmental assessment, procurement, and if applicable, MBE and WBE, Davis-Bacon, Section 3. Next slide, please. The RFP must be a public or private non-profit agency or organization, must be in good standing with the state of Missouri. You can search the Missouri Secretary of State on the website, which is www.sos.mo.gov. With your application, you will need to upload certificate of good standing from the Missouri Secretary of State, IRS Form 501c3 determination letter, and current IRS 990 or automatic approved extension. These documents are vital for us to process your RFP. Next slide, please. Now, if you're funded, there will be additional documents that you have to provide before you can enter into a contract with the CDA. There will be a state tax exempt letter, a state sealed certificate of incorporation, along with a copy of the articles of incorporation, copy of the board of directors bylaws, and a completed CDA board list with current board of directors, job titles, employers, mailing addresses, business owned, and race ethnicity information. These are requirements that we have to pass on to any agencies applying for grants with the CDA. Next slide, please. Also, organizations must have the capacity to undertake the proposed activities. Bylaws must authorize the type of activities proposed in your application, must demonstrate that the board, staff, and or partner agencies have the capacity to show how this will get done. If funded, additional documents will be needed before you can enter into a contract. Now, we've been through this the previous slide, but these are documents that will be also on your checklist before any contract is issued between yourselves and CDA. Next slide, please. We are very particular about the application deadline. Sometimes agencies come back a day after the closing deadline, or a week, or a couple of days later, expecting us to stop everything and pick up their application. Well, we can do that. So the only application submitted via Salesforce at cdagrants.stlouis-mo.gov will be accepted. And all proposals submitted after the closing date and time of 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on Friday, September 5, 2025, will not be reviewed, and there will be no exceptions will be granted. City of St. Louis is very particular, and this is a very strict requirement, and we are not going to accept anything after that time on that date. The next slide, please, if there's one for me. No. Best practices. Maybe I can just guide you into this, if I may. This is today the 15th. The next slide, please.
Ben, I think this is going over to my section now.
I wasn't enjoying it so much, actually.
I know, you just wanted to keep going
really,
forever.
But thank you so much, and we'll be taking questions after the seminar. Thanks again.
Thanks, Ben. Hello, everyone. Again, welcome. My name is Colleen Pollock. I am a grants manager here at CDA, and I'm going to go over with you just some of the sections of the RFP that are included in the RFP and the application that has been released, and just highlight some common areas where agencies have maybe run up against some challenges in the past, because we want to make sure that you are able to fully and completely submit an application so you can be reviewed. So just to start out with, some common RFP mistakes that we do see are listed on here. You'd be surprised how many people and agencies don't fully follow instructions. We get a lot of applications, and the applications we receive need to be fully and completely answered. All of the documents that need to be uploaded, all of the questions fully answered. Otherwise, we will not be able to necessarily consider the application for funding. So it's very important that you follow the instructions. And that's also why it's so important that you start working on your application early and often, so that if you have any questions, you can get them to us before the question deadline of August 22nd. After that question deadline that was previously shared of August 22nd, as was shared, we won't be able to further answer any questions about the application. If there are challenges in Salesforce, you can ask those questions until September 1st, but specifically questions about how do I answer this need to come by that deadline. Can I have the next slide, please? And so when we're talking about the different sections that are in the RFP, the first thing you really want to think about is whether or not you even qualify for this grant or qualify for funding through this funding opportunity. So make sure that you closely read carefully that section in the RFP that talks about the national objectives and what CDA's priorities are for this funding cycle. Because if the activity you propose, it might be a great program, but if it does not meet one of our national objectives, it cannot be funded. So it is very important that you closely review the RFP to make sure that your activity fits within a national objective and that it also meets an eligible activity. And those are listed and discussed in the RFP as well. From those eligible activities, as you see, the City of St. Louis, as we identified in the RFP, we also do have certain priorities that we have identified as being very important for the St. Louis community at this time based on needs assessments that we have conducted. So make sure you're very closely review those sections. And then in your application, you reference how what your activity does, your program does, meets those priorities that we have. Included in the RFP is an instruction sheet checklist. So we recommend that once you complete your application, you use that checklist to make sure that you have fully answered and completed the application before you hit submit. Once you hit submit, that's it. So make sure you fully and review before you hit submit. Because as we've said, It's very important because if some things are not met, that could disqualify you from being considered for funding. And again, if you have any questions, send those to cdbg@stlouis-mo.gov. Next link, thank you. Also included in the RFP is an acknowledgement and certification document. So it's very important that you read this carefully because it tells you some very important things that you are agreeing to do if you're funded by CDA and that you are attesting to by submitting your application. So make sure that is fully reviewed and it must be signed by an authorized signer for your organization, which usually includes the executive director, or the board president, or some other person who has been formally designated by your organization to be an authorized signatory on documents. One of the common mistakes that we see that I want to highlight here from the RFP section that talks about your organization profile is not having SAM.gov issues resolved prior to your proposal submission. Since this is federal funding, all organizations or entities that receive this funding must be in good standing with SAM.gov. So if you don't know if you are or not, you can just go to sam.gov, create an account, and you can search for your organization. If you are not set up with sam.gov, you can complete an application to get set up. It is free, so it's not anything that costs you anything, but it can take time for that information to be reviewed. So make sure that you confirm that early, that you have sam.gov issues resolved. Next slide, please. This is an example of what the sam.gov website looks like. So you can see you just go to literally sam.gov. And here you can see where you can check, you can search for a different entity, and you can even start to register your own entity to get that unique identification number that we will need in order to process your application. Next slide, please. Kind of on the next sections for the RFP, talks about getting into the narratives and your background. So this is where you can really start telling us about why your organization is unique, why your activities are so important, and the capacity that you have to execute the program. The responses in these sections can significantly affect your overall ratings, and so make sure that you spend time being clear, inclusive, but also succinct. Instead, we have many applications that we need to that we will review. And so we want you to be clear and inclusive, but also make sure you're succinct so that we can get all the most important pieces. And also in this section, this is where some of those licenses that may be required are able to be uploaded. So one of the examples, if you are a daycare, we know you need to be licensed by the state of Missouri as a daycare in order to operate. So make sure this would be where you could provide a license like that. As I said, this is your opportunity to be persuasive and convince us, when we're doing the reviewing and the rating, be persuasive about why this funding applies to your activities. And also make sure that when you are doing your application for an activity, that the activity you're proposing matches the purpose and is reasonably related to the services that you provide. We don't want you creating a program that doesn't make sense with your organization just to apply for this funding. So if you're a daycare center that provides services to toddlers, this is not the type of thing where you would request funding for an offender reentry program without adequately explaining how this purpose fits within your agency's mission and your organization. Next section, please. Or next slide. On the next section, they'll be asking you if that is the grant administration history. So this is for you to tell us how you have the capacity to administer federal funding. Federal funding has some very specific requirements and very, very detailed reporting that is required. And so we want to make sure you have the capacity to do that. Those organizations that are already funded by CDA, you know what it looks like and you have that experience, you can talk about that. But for organizations that have not been previously funded by CDA, we do require a letter of recommendation from another funder. It doesn't have to necessarily be a federal funder, but just another funder that has funded your organization, and you'll need to get a letter of recommendation from them and upload that to your application. For the next section is on these personnel descriptions and resumes. It's really important that you remember we need both your job descriptions and the resumes of people who are on staff who are filling those job descriptions. Sometimes we get the uploads that it only includes the job descriptions, and that is not enough for what we need. So we need both resumes and job descriptions. Now, if in your proposal you are proposing going to need to hire a person, but they're not on staff yet, that's fine. Just make sure that you upload that job description for us, and in a personnel data table, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you would still list that position, but just indicate that that person is still to be hired. It's also important when you are going through the personnel sections that you include all of the staff that will be involved with the project and program you are proposing funding, not just the people who you're proposing paying with CDA, CDBG funding. So for example, oftentimes a CFO is going to be critical to providing the financial information that we need in order to meet the compliance requirements of the grant. But sometimes that person, you're not requesting CDBG funding for that person, but they're still critical to the administration of the grant. And so they do need to make sure to be included in this section. Another common mistake we see is that subcontractors or contractors are added to the personnel section. In the personnel section, we only need the staff, employees of your organization. Any contractors that you have on staff or will be bringing on will go in the contractual professional services section, not in your personnel section. And it's important to remember that if you are funded, there are certain requirements that agencies are required to follow when they are hiring someone who was not included in the application. So if you are funded, your program monitor from CDA will work with you to ensure that you meet all those requirements so that we can continue to find you in compliance. Next slide, please. As we said, some of the items that are included in this section do waterfall over into our personnel schedule, which is later in the application. And we're going to show examples of that in future slides. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're moving on to the financial management section of the RFP and in your application. As Ben shared earlier, you are required to submit your most recent 990. If you did get an extension, make sure that you share that extension letter with us so we know that you are in compliance with your federal tax requirements. Common mistakes, again, not attaching that extension and not entering the financial staff who is going to be part of administering the grant into the personnel description and providing the resume and job descriptions. So make sure that the financial management piece is just as clear and succinct as you are when you're talking about the project activities in your program. Next slide, please. What we're looking for in this section is to make sure that you can demonstrate that you have systems and controls in place that will allow you to administer federal funding. As we said before, federal funding has some very specific, detailed requirements for reporting, both financial and programmatic. And so we want to make sure that you have the capacity and the qualifications to be able to rise to that and meet those needs. So make sure you provide sufficient detail about how you segregate those major accounting functions within your organization. If you use an outside accounting firm, if you use an external auditor, what does your board of directors oversight look like of your organization? Make sure to include all of that information in your financial management narrative sections. Next slide, please. Okay. There also are specific audit requirements that go along with agencies that receive federal funding. So any agency or organization that receives $1 million or more in federal funding in a year is required to complete a single federal audit. If your organization or agency falls within this requirement, we will need you to, in addition to uploading your 990, also share with us your federal single audit, your most recent federal single audit. And the section of the federal law with the audit requirements is listed there if you want to take a look at that. But common mistakes would be not providing enough detail to support that you have knowledge about the audit process, that you're going to budget to make sure the audit is done. And you can see those things listed here. But just make sure that if you are an agency that requires a single federal audit, that you upload that full audit, your audited financial statements and management reports for us. Next slide, please. If as part of your federal audit, you did have any findings that resulted, whether from OMB or from the agency that conducted your audit, make sure that you address those here in your application, what the steps you're taking to resolve those issues, so that we know that anything that has come up in a prior federal audit is being appropriately addressed within your agency and that those issues are being resolved. And same with those operating budgets. Okay, so that is the financial piece. So now we're going to move on to the activities section of the RFP and your application. Oh, you can go back. Okay, can you go back one slide? There we go. And so this is where you really get into the meat of your project that you're requesting funding for. Now, one of the things that's very important is if you determine whether you need separate proposals or one proposal. So for example, if you're one agency and you want to submit a proposal for an after-school program that takes place at 3 different locations, say it's 3 different schools or 3 different community centers, you can put those together as one proposal, but you must be very clear in your application exactly where those activities are going to happen. So make sure we have all 3 addresses, all 3 locations, and who's going to be served at them. Now, if you're an agency that has an after-school program and say a daycare center, but those are 2 separate distinct programs, that would require 2 separate proposals. So we wouldn't want you to, so that means 2 applications. So only do that one application with multiple activities. It's the same activity, just taking place at different locations. If it's different activities, we need different proposals. And a common mistake that we see in the activity set cover sheet section is that the contact person listed doesn't end up being the actual primary contact person for the proposed activity. There are sections in the application where we ask about who the executive director is, who your chief financial officer is, but this section here, we really want to know who is that primary contact person for this proposed activity and program that you're requesting funding for. Next slide, please. When it comes to your funding request, make sure you're realistic, but also reasonable, for what you need to execute your program. We do have a $25,000 minimum request. So make sure that you honor that when you are considering what your funding request is going to be. So when you name your activity, be descriptive yet succinct, because then what you name as your activity is going to be what ends up in your contracts. Is the name of your project. So as you can see here, it could be XYZ after school program, ABC financial literacy program. So be clear and succinct about what your program is. For the activity summary mission statement section, this is not just asking for the typical mission statement that agencies have. With agencies, our mission statement should be short and to the point, and fewer words better. This is not asking for necessarily your agency's mission statement that you have on your website. This is asking for that real summary about your mission. So make sure that you not only just include the activity name, but that purpose, location, service areas, populations, number of people served that you anticipate, that all of that is included in your 100-word or less summary. Because this summary that you provide is also going to be transferred into your contract if you are selected for funding. A thing to keep in mind is that you need to make sure that nowhere in your proposal do you include any political or religious references. So not to specific wards or specific religious references. Make sure you stay very focused on just what those activities you're delivering to our citizens are. Okay, and next slide, please. Okay, now when you get into the activity description, it is very important that you are very clear here about your program design so that we can appropriately evaluate it. So this is where we want to know the who, what, the when, and the how. If program design is not fully explained with all of those pieces, then your score will be significantly reduced. So make sure you take the time to be clear and succinct and complete when you are filling out this section. This is also your opportunity to refer to where your proposed activities apply, discuss narratively about how this works fits within the national objective, the participants that are CDBG eligible for being lower moderate income individuals. And you can also discuss here how this fits within the funding priorities that CDA has identified within the RFP. So again, make sure to fully describe your program and that includes the service area. So if you have census tracts, neighborhoods, zip codes, the more detailed you can get for us, the better. Next slide, please. And once you've filled out those informations, we're going to get into your goals and outputs. And so there will be a section within the application where you fill out and select your different outputs that you have for the grant. You can have one output or more. There's no requirement. We have funded agencies that have everywhere from 1 to 3 outputs or more, but just make sure it relates to what your actual activities are and your projects are. So the outputs are things that should be measurable. Outputs are things that we are going to count. And so how many people are you going to serve? How many kids will be in this after school program? How many households will receive financial literacy education? Like whatever it is, like we need that output to be measurable. And the reimbursements that we provide, this is a reimbursable grant program, will be tied to you meeting those outputs. And so it's really important that they're very clear, measurable, and realistic for your organization to meet. And this comes to us, like obviously we want to know that the funding that we have is having an impact, but it's also a requirement from HUD. And so we have to report on your success and your measurable outputs to HUD every year. So once you know those outputs, those things you want to count, you have to be able to be prepared to justify those on a per unit cost basis. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk more about that of how to fill out that section of the application. But so when you're determining whether or not your request is reasonable, then we make sure that you are thinking about the per unit cost as well. Next slide, please. Okay. So an example, still going for like a summer program. So summer camp for low moderate income youth, for youth from low moderate income families. So your organization wants to request $200,000 for the summer. I think you're going to serve 25 children for 3 months. Now this is where you get to do some math to figure out if that's what you're requesting, to serve 25 children for 3 months. Can you justify in your narratives that $8,000 per child is reasonable? So that monthly cost is reasonable. So when you're doing your financial section, we want to know what's going into that monthly cost so that we can determine whether your request is reasonable. So make sure you're detailed with how you got to that. Next slide, please. Okay. For public improvements and facilities requests, you need to make sure that you have documented site control. So you have to be able to provide in your application that either your nonprofit organization owns the property, or if you are wanting to partner with another organization, that there is site control and a letter of understanding between the two of you that gives you access to do what you're proposing in this location. A special thing to keep in mind too is that if you're proposing doing anything with the city, you need to have support from that city agency to include with your application. Remember that the projects that are currently under construction or planned to begin construction before June of 2026 are not eligible for this round of CDBG funding. So if you have a project you're planning for next year, that's great. Go ahead and you can put in an application now, but if it's already underway and something's happening, then that's not going to be eligible for this funding. Remembering with construction that and why we have this timeline out is that we have certain things that we have to get done before you can start construction that are federal compliance requirements on our end that must be completed. And so that is why we state that the construction not begin until June, so that as part of your application, you can, request some information from different construction budgets to try to put together a construction budget. But we don't want you to take your project out to like a full bid where you do an RFP and submit that and get full sealed bids in. We CDA, if we're funding your project, needs to be a part of that process with you. So that's why we need that to wait until you're funded so that we as your monitor can work with you as you're going through the bid process to ensure that everything around it complies with federal guidelines so that we can then reimburse you for the project. And it's also important to just remember that whoever prepares your construction budget for you cannot compete in the sealed bid process. And that is a federal requirement. Next slide, please. Okay. One of the things that we are going to have to complete is an environmental review. That is something that CDA will complete, but if your agency is funded, we will complete an environmental review. And once that is approved by HUD, then you can move forward with that work. So this is one of those steps that has to take place before you can fully move forward. If you start doing the things like putting out for bids or doing construction prior to this happening, then that could lead us to have to rescind your funding. It's called a choice limiting action, and we don't want any of that to happen. A good thing to keep in mind here too is that if you receive CDBG funding on a project, it alters all other funding sources. So those strict CDBG requirements, those then apply to all of the funding sources in the project. And so all funding sources will have to adhere to the stringent set of regulations. So keep that in mind when you're selecting your project or your proposal of what you'd like to request for funding. That if it is a large project that has a large capital stack with several different levels of funding, just knowing that these specific CDB guidelines will apply to all your funding. Next slide, please. Oops, there we go. Talking more about now we get into your budget narratives. The CDBG funds that you're requesting are not intended to fully fund your entire program. So we want you to leverage the CDBG funding. We want you to be able to say, I got this from the city of St. Louis and CDBG funding, and use that to get funding, leverage funding from other sources. And so make sure in your application and your budget, you identify for us how you would leverage the CDBG funding for other funding sources. And make sure you're realistic in those budget projections. We will require an expense and revenue budget within your application. So this is where all of that information will go. Some things to keep in mind as tips when you're going through the application of what we see. Make sure everything matches. Make sure that your math is correct. Double check your math. Make sure that you're not asking for more in expenses than you have in revenue. So just keep all of those things in mind as you are building your budgets and talking about your budget activities. Also to keep in mind is that any contracts for professional services, supplies, equipment, even printing, if you're doing a bunch of large signs, if that is over $10,000, there is, I'm sorry, 10,000 or more, there is a there is a specific procurement process that you must go through in order for that activity to end up being funded by CDA and reimbursable by CDA. So just make sure that you keep that in mind, that anytime you plan on spending $10,000 or more on professional services, supplies, equipment, that there will be another added process that you will have to go through with CDA. And when it comes to personnel, as we talked about, there being very specific and tight reporting requirements. For everyone that touches the program, we could potentially need timesheets. Everyone will need a conflict of interest form. Everyone will need secondary employment forms. There's a process you have to go through before you can hire someone new. So keep all that in mind as you're building the budget of what you want to request from CDA and from CDBG funds to go towards your program. Next slide, please. Okay. There's just some of those common mistakes that we see. Again, be descriptive, share your leverage funds. And again, don't include contractors under your personnel costs. That goes under professional services and contracts. Next slide, please. Now, the personnel schedule, this is a section of the application where you will be able to tell us about the people and or positions who will be working on the project. So it is a table that you will be able to fill out, and we're going to look at an example of the table here in a second. Know that several of the pieces will auto-populate and should add up for you. So just make sure that you double check those and that everything is accurate in the complete table. Especially when it comes to the percent of eligible benefits. So if you do have personnel and you would like to request fringe for them, that can be added here, but just make sure you check that and that the amounts that are being requested on those fringe benefits do not exceed the amount that's being requested for salaries. Or the percent for salaries, I'm sorry. And just to keep in mind, make sure your numbers are very accurate, that the actual salary you report is the actual salary for the pay period, that you tell us the pay periods correctly, and that the percent inserted from the organization narratives is correct. Next slide, please. This is an example of what the personnel schedule will look like as you're filling it out. So you can see that under the actual salary section, we need the actual salary, not what is going to CDBG, but what is that person actually paid within the pay period. Then you can tell us how much of that, from 0 to 100%, you are requesting go towards the CDBG award. And then the pay period's in a year, and then the form will automatically calculate for you the amount of that person's salary that you're suggesting that you are requesting to be funded by CDBG. So it's important that you start out correctly at the beginning with that actual salary per pay period and get your percents and pay period numbers correctly. Next slide, please. And then this is just another section of the form that will auto-populate for you as you add in your subtotals and your fringe. So again, with this, just make sure that the benefit rate, so that percent that goes into your fringe, is equal to or less than the salary rate. Next slide, please. If you have hourly people who are going to be working on the program that are part-time, this is where you can enter them. So for here, again, you're going to be doing in section C, their hourly rate. And then for this one under where column D is, this is the amount of hours that they are expected to use towards the program. So they might be an employee who works more than 260 hours, for example, James here. Maybe he works 500, maybe he works 1,000, but only 260 of that is going to be applied to this project. And then you tell us how, and then that will auto-calculate based on the rate and the hours. And then you tell us how much of that you want to put towards your CDBG funding. Even if the person's spending 260 hours on the project, you may not necessarily be requesting CDBG funding to pay that person. So it can be, again, anywhere from 0 to 100%. It's important to remember on these schedules, again, you include everyone who works on the project, not just people you're requesting funding for. So if Mr. Liu here, the accountant, was working the 260 hours, but your percent of time charged to CDBG was 0, you would still put him on here because he's working on the project. So make sure you include everyone who's working on the project. Next slide, please. Again, only include the employees of your organization, not contractors or consultants in your personnel schedule. They will go in your budget under professional services and contractors. Next slide, please. The final section I'm going to talk about is the reimbursement analysis. So this is where we get back to those per unit costs that we talked about earlier. And this is based on the amount of funding you're requesting and the outputs that you are proposing that you could meet within this grant funding. So make sure that your units of service are clear and defined. And if you're making any assumptions or calculations, tell us what they are. Make sure we can follow your math to know how you got to the amount that you're requesting. So examples of units of service that we often see would be like meals that are delivered to seniors, workshops that are completed, gardens planted, daily attendance at after-school programs or summer camps. Those are examples of a unit of service. Next slide, please. And these are just some of the factors that you can consider when you're determining your your per unit cost, excuse me. And just keep in mind that your units of service must be related to the outputs, but they don't have to be the same. So for example, when we talked about an after school program before, you might say that you're gonna have 25, your goal is to serve 25 children, but those children are gonna attend Monday through Friday for 3 months. So the number, your output might be those 25 children, but your units of service is going to be based on their attendance. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So here's an example of how we're just going to go through a few examples quickly of how some different programs can calculate their unit of service. So if we're doing a beautification program in a low moderate income neighborhood, you might say we want $25,000 to complete 10 neighborhood cleanups. So that's $2,500 per cleanup. Your unit of service would be that $2,500, and and per cleanup completed, we could then reimburse you $2,500 up to your full $25,000 amount. Next slide, please. For the meals example, this one, it's not going to be by, obviously, like the cleanup projects that were done last one, this would be by meals served. And so you can look through here to see how that calculation was done. We have our 100 total seniors, which would be our output that we talked about. So you would want to serve 100 meals to seniors. You know what, and B was more detailed in that, but to give you that 100 is your output. If each senior is going to have 2 meals a day for 7 days a week for 50 weeks, you can see the math there, which gets you to a per unit rate of $1.07 per meal. And so then we would reimburse you $1.07 per meal that is delivered to those 100 seniors. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is one for that after thinking about if you were doing an after school program. This could also apply to a summer camp. This could also apply to tutoring, some of those different kind of youth programs where students attend, or children or people really attend a certain activity. So you can see how here you have your 150 youth as your goal of your output. You want to serve 150 youth across your contract, but you think you have the capacity to do 120 a day, but only 80% usually show up. You do some math and you can see how that waterfalls down to get you to your per unit rate of $5.79 per student per day is what that gets us down to. Next slide, please. Oh. Okay. And this is just the last example. You can see this is for a job training program. And again, when you go through the math, we have those 75 clients, which would be your output, serve 75 clients with this program. 60, and then there's phases of the program. So you have clients who are projected to complete at different phases. So here you would potentially have 2 per unit reimbursement costs, because phase 1 includes maybe phase 1 is some kind of intake or assessment, and then phase 2 is the completion of a training. Those are two separate parts of the program, and that walk from one to the other, and so they would have different per unit costs. And so you can see here how you can split that out to get down to the per unit rate per individual for completing each phase.
Almost.
Next slide, please. All right, so at this point, I am going to turn it over to Gul, and any outstanding questions, please drop in the chat and we will answer them live at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin Pollock. Hi, everyone. Good noon. My name is Gul Fitihi, and I am serving as CDS Program Manager, working on different grants I will be presenting the general requirement and organization capacity. I will make sure to catch up with the time also. We're gonna start with the application. Well, actually, Ben and colleague already talked about the application, so I will just quick review here also again. When you submit your application, we really need the resume, job description of the stuff involved, and in any capacity to manage the grants that you're gonna be awarded. That could be in administration, operation, management, and proposed program. We need the organization chart of your organization to show the clear hierarchy of your organization, the positions, and also those positions there to be hired under this grant. And letter of the recommendation from your previous funder or otherwise funded by CDA. So if you are a new agency and we're applying for the grant through CDA, you have to provide the letter of recommendation from your previous funder. Next slide, please. Conflict of interest. So when you're applying for the grant, make sure that you provide the clear conflict of interest with your application, and that can be changed when, in case you are awarded. We will have more or less, but whoever in any capacity will be involved in this managing the grant or working on this program, they need to sign the clear certificate of the conflict of interest. We will talk about the conflict of interest later in the presentation. And also, one thing that the HUD does not allow the fund to be used on religious activities, lobbying, or any political activities. It's clear that's a violation, so you can lose the fund and also other penalty. Next slide, please. With your application, where my colleagues already talked about this, but we'll go in deep about this. We need the SAMS.gov ID for each applicant who applying for the federal grant. The first one is the federal tax ID, which you can get that from the SAMS.gov. If your organization doesn't have, you can apply for that for free. And in case when you're filling out the application and you didn't receive the approved one, you can just send us the request that you submitted to the SAMS.gov, and they will provide you a receipt of that. So you can send that also. That will also substitute for the SAMS.gov until you get the whole ID approved by the federal government. We also need the EIN, which is the free, the same, and also the tax exempt for your organization. You can get that from the IRS. Any organization applying for the funding must have the unique entity identifier that replaced by DUNS, which is the Data Universal Numbering System, which was previously used by the federal government. Now that replaced with the UEI. It's free to all the businesses. They require to register with the US federal government for contract or any grant they want to apply. Next slide, please. So when you apply for this, they will determine that you're not debarred from the working with the federal government. So you include your delinquent federal tax to be clear that in your application, and CDA strongly encourage you to register as early as possible. So that's one of the easy way. So you can start now and have the SAMS.gov ID. Next slide, please. E-Verify for each applicant that want to apply and get funded by the federal grant through CDA, we need the E-Verify registration. That's clear. You have to provide this through your application, and when you award it, we will also need this for as a part of the contract attachment with your agreement, so you can register with with the website. It's listed here on the screen, you can see. And if you have any question with that, you can drop your question in Q and answer, and our team will answer that. Next slide, please. CBIs, that's the central business index with the city of St. Louis, which you can call the number listed here to get that clearance before you apply with the that should be attached with the CBI clearance should be attached with your application, and that work only for 1 month. When we receive that, that will be already expired, that's okay. But when you got awarded, we will again run that CBI with City of St. Louis to be clear what your taxes and what your organizational licenses. So if you have any question regarding that, you can reach out. Is the number listed here, or you can reach out to CDA team members and also put the question in the Q and answer box for that. Next slide, please. Insurance. This is one of the terms and condition of the agreement, that when you award it, you have to have the insurance. But when you're filling your application, you also need to provide these, that your organization has the insurance and bonding and general liability. So, and also CDA listed as an additional insured or certificate holder, that CDA will not be liable for any thing that happened during the life of the life of this contract when you are implementing. And you can see the list of the liabilities here, that the general liability, the automobile liability, and worker compensations. And you can find out how that apply to your organization, the worker compensations, through the website listed here on the screen. Next slide, please. In addition to those general liability and automobile liability, the City of St. Louis CDA also required the agencies to provide the honesty bonding or theft policy coverage. The limit is at least 25,000 per coverage, and it could be more, but the least amount is 25,000 for each occurrence. So that's one of the requirements that CDA apply to the grant. Next slide, please. So this section is the required CDBG policies and procedure. We require every agency and organization that working with the CDA to have all the policies, procedures that make them compliance with the HUD and state and local requirement when they get funded. Next slide, please. So the policies listed here are the grievance policy, conflict of interest policy, non-discrimination policies, and all these policies should be in clear, written, and submitted through the application, and also when they award it. So all these policies should be received by CDA prior to starting the contract. Next slide, please. The grievance policy that must have the written, every organization or every agency that working with CDA should have the written grievance policy pertaining their employee. So they should include specifying the response procedure, time frame, and staff person responsible for handling the grievance. Should address complaints of the discrimination and complaints when they feel deprived of the benefit offered under the CDBG program, and must incorporate specific item and deadline, which we can talk in next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. So the complaints of the discrimination: when an applicant, participant, or registrant believe that he or she or any specific class individual has been or is being subjected to discrimination. Federally protected class-based discrimination could be based on the color, sex, national origin, age, disability, family status, and also political affiliation. So Please note that the City of St. Louis has additional protected classes, which you can find it out in the link listed here. And all the complaint discrimination must be forwarded to the city executive director within 2 days of the complaints filed by individual with the organization. Next slide, please. So here it shows when the agency should make every reasonable effort to resolve the issue within 15 working business days. In case the agency was not able to resolve that, they should report that to the CDA, or in any how they should report that to the city executive director within 2 working days of the exhaustion of the deadline, the 15 working days. And then CDA will be involved in resolving and addressing that issues. Next slide, please. Conflict of interest. Any agency awarded under the CDA or the CDBG funding, they should provide the conflict of interest. Any employee of the organization involved in any capacity in administering the grant, regardless of they get paid out of the CDBG funding or not, they should have a signed certified certificate of conflict of interest. All the board member, executive director, board president, employee who is involved in administering the grant, they should have the conflict of interest signed. And also, if in case there are certain cases that there should be exception, that should be requested prior to hiring or involving that person, and also that should be publicly published in a newspaper. And also the cost of that publishing on a newspaper should be paid by the person who have the conflict of interest. For example, if a son of the board member was hired as the program coordinator for CDBG funded after school program, so these are an example of the conflict of interest. But before hiring this, that should be approved by CDA, requested and a favor, and that's a very rare case. If there is no anybody qualified for that and that was hired, that will be like a very rare case. But or a senior center has a board member who participate in CDBG funded exercise program at the center, or executive director of the CDBG funded food pantry also owns an accounting company which has been awarded a contract out of the CDBG grant that they were awarded. So these are the clear conflict of interest examples. So should be avoided unless waived otherwise. Next slide, please. Conflict of interest continued. Organization must maintain written code of standard conduct covering the conflict of interest. Beside that, we will be providing a conflict of interest form that they sign. They should have that code of conduct in their policies. Board member, executive director, staff paid with CDBG fund staff involved in the management administration procurement will be required to sign the conflict of interest. Tom, can you look at the screen why I have this black? Oh, thank you. And CDB funded staff will be required to sign both conflict of interest and the employee secondary employment questionnaire. So the employee secondary questionnaire they're required only by those employees that they get paid by the CDBG grant. But the conflict of interest, that's regardless of the pay. As long as they are involved in administering that grant, they have to sign the conflict of interest. But the employee secondary questionnaire, only those who get paid by CDBG funds. Next slide, please. Non-discrimination policy. Agency awarded funding must comply with the intent of the policy, required to develop a written procedure which incorporate also the CDA non-discrimination policy, still require to comply with equal opportunity law and or regulation contained in your work contract with CDA. Especially when you're hiring the new employee, you have to comply with the EEO policies of the CDA. Next slide, please. So again, required item in your application when you submit, you have to make yourself sure that you submit the IRS 501 determination letter, UEE number, certificate of good standing from the Missouri Secretary of State to make sure it's not expired, current IRS 990 or extension, resume and job description of the staff involved in the administration, operation, management, or procurement of the program, organizational chart, letter of recommendation from your previous funder, if not funded by CDA previously. Next slide, please. Required item. So now we are in the contract process. The following item needed prior to entering into the contract. The previous requirements were for your application, but now they might be some the same, but some extra when you are entering into a contract with CDA. State tax exempt letter if you are a nonprofit, state sealed certificate of incorporation along with a copy of article of the incorporation, bylaws, completed CDA board list, signed conflict of interest form with all board member or who involved in the administration of the CDBG fund, and also secondary employment form signed by all CDBG funded personnel, E-Verify registration, CBI clearance, SAMS.gov. Next slide, please. Required item continue. So we also need insurance certificate. The insurance certificate must include general liability, vehicle liability, worker compensation, bonding, like dishonesty, crime or theft policy, grievance policy, conflict of interest policy, non-discrimination policy, personal policies and procedure manual, and living wage affidavit. And next slide, please. So now we're in the construction part of our presentation. Those who already work or want to work or want to apply for any public improvement or construction, these are some tips that need to be considered. Construction requirement and definition, public improvement or facility activities. So these are the requirements. If your agency want to work on the construction projects and they are a nonprofit, so make sure that the facility or the property you're working on is publicly owned facilities, infrastructure such as street, playground, and underground utilities, building owned by nonprofit that are open to the public, acquisition, construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, or installation of public facilities and improvement, maintenance activity are not eligible under the CDBG program. So must meet a national objective, typically low to moderate income individual as an area benefit activities. So my colleague already talked about the national objective and how you can align your proposed activity to that. Next slide, please. Site control. So before you apply for any construction project, you make sure you own the site and you have the site control, which Colin already talked about, that you have the proof of the control over the property. That could be, for example, deed, lease with allowance to the Rehab Land Reutilization Authority, LRA. If leasing the property, owner must provide a statement of the allowance to rehab the property and also the deed of trust or land use restriction agreement between you and the property owner. So then that could be considered under this program. And clear title upon the construction, the title should be clear. If site is city owned, description of the interaction applicant has had with the LRA, Board of the Public Service, Department of Parks or Recreation, or any other city agency that you work with that on that site, and must be in the name of the applicant. When you also submit your application for a construction project, you have to have a timeline that outline your start date, your milestones down the line of the completion of the project, and also the end date of your project, when your project will be completed. Next slide, please. Tom, next slide, please. Okay, no problem. Oh, okay, so in this section, the construction requirement, design documents, photographs, construction budget, and resume. Required at the time of application. Design drawing indicating the proposed scope of the work. You make sure you have the complete drawing of your proposed activity that show the scope of work, the timeline, and everything that you want to complete under the CDBG grant program. And if you are in a section 106 of Historic Preservation Act, applicate, even if not at a historic building or in a designated city, National Historic District administered by the cultural resource, you put off the existing building. These are very important, that when you should have the before current condition of the property that you want to work on it. That's important for our environmental review, and also will be required for the section 106 and also the environmental review. Use a picture taking diagram. It's on the CDA website. You will get a free tip that how to take the proper pictures that we can use at CDA when we review your application. Professionally prepared construction budget is not a bid document. You have to provide us a complete development cost of your project and the construction cost of the projects, the resources. For that, we will provide a pro forma workbook, so that will be easy for the agency to fill out that and be in compliance with the CDA requirement. And also construction resume, that's also part of the pro forma that will be, you can fill it out, that beside you provide the resume of your construction work, you fill out those fields also that include like your experience, the agency's experience, key project that you completed, the project's name, scope of the project, date, address, architectural, general contractor, construction cost, square footage of the property that you worked before, for us to determine that you are eligible for completing this work or not. Next slide, please. Procurement in the construction project. You must obtain a prior approval from CDA when you release any RFP for example, if you want to hire a JC, general contractor, or any other third party to carry out any of your proposed activity, you should share the RFP when you draft it with CDA to get the approval prior to release of that. And also that RFP should include, if applicable, the Section 3 Davis-Bacon, BABA, which is Build Buy America and Build America, seal it, advertisement, and also bid. Do you want to advertise, and also 30-day period that they are published for public, and must be posted in a general circulation paper, minority paper, and with crossroads plan room. Must select the lowest response bidder. When you receive your responses for your RFP, you make sure that you select the lowest price, unless there is a rare case and you provide the clear justification why the lowest price bid were not selected. And that could be reviewed and approved by CDA. And then you can proceed with that one. Next slide, please. Construction requirement, Davis-Bacon. Required of any public improvement or facility activity awarded 2,000 or more under the federal grant any agency that they awarded 2,000 or more in construction, they should comply with the Davis-Bacon Act. All construction worker must be paid a privilege wage documented by certified payrolls and also to be reviewed by CDA. And CDA will interview the worker to confirm the privilege wages they're receiving. If applicable, assign memorandum of agreement indicating who will monitor the Davis-Bacon requirement must be issued prior to the CDA preliminary approval of the RFP. A MO may also required under the following circumstances. Either federal funded are utilized and the proposed project receive more than one federal grant and also site is the city-owned or Board of Public Service. Davis-Bacon Monitor will discuss more in depth when required. Next slide, please. Section 3 overview under the construction requirement. List any project awarded 200 or 100,000 or above and CDBG funding, they're required to comply with the Section 3. 25% of the total number of the paid labor hours should be performed by Section 3 labor and Section 3 workers. 5% of the total number of the paid labor hours are to be performed by targeted Section 3 laborers and Section 3 plan, Section 3 business certification, Section 3 worker certification, quarterly report and annual report, final project report. All these are required to submit it to the CDA. And next slide, please. Again, Section 3 overview. Project awarded 200,000 or more and CDA funding for public service facility improvement or construction required to adhere to Section 3 policies and act requirements apply to entire Section 3 projects, regardless of whether the project is fully or partially funded by the CDA or under the CDBG program. CDA must issue approval to the Section 3 plan. So the applicant must submit their Section 3 plan for CDA approval and review. On-time quarterly report must be submitted to the CDA and year-end summary report must be submitted to CDA. And CDA will provide all these forms to the agency after they've been awarded, so they can work on that. And CDA program monitor will work with the agency to make sure they find them in compliance with all these action policies. Next slide, please. Again, the Section 3 overview. After funding award are announced, the CDA program monitor assigned to your project will issue notification to the CDA Section 3 coordinator at the CDA office, and they will reach out to you to work on that, to introduce themselves and also to introduce the requirement and also the form that I already talked about that last previous slide. Once the form are reviewed, the Section 3 coordinator will review and contact you with any necessary change, provision, revision, or any other question or missing the supporting document they require. After all revision and additional requests have been met, then the Section 3 participation is approved. You will be issued an approval letter from the CDA. Remember, qualified subcontractor who are also eligible as a Section 3 business concern are intended to get priority under the HUD rules and start working with CDA already to CDA early to help you get through the process smoothly. And above all, construction will not be permitted to start until Section 3 is approved. So you make sure that you receive the approval prior to start working. CDA will issue the go ahead later, but in case some of the agency, as soon as they get their executed contract, they start working prior to informing the CDA program monitor or getting their Section 3 plan approved. Next slide, please. The other construction requirement, Build America, Buy America, BABA. So the total development cost of 250,000 and above, they have to comply with the BABA Act, applies to CDBG funding, manufacturer certification, general waiver available for exigent circumstances, de minimis or tribal recipients. So there are some cases the waiver can be issued for and different and issues and cases in several cases that can be issued. And project specific waiver subject to hard review and approval. And any rare cases that those are not applicable in that situation, that the waiver can be requested and that can be reviewed by HOT and get approved by them or rejected by them. Next slide, please. Construction requirement item in application. For each agency that they're entering into a contract with CDA and for any project, we have a project checklist, but it's different from the service projects to the construction project. In construction project, we need these items with your application. Project experience, all the project that your agency have already completed, you have to submit that. The project name, scope of work, date, address, architect, your GC, construction cost and square footage, site control for the current property that you want to work, project schedule, clearly outline that the dates and milestones and end date of your project, professional construction budget, not a bid, that could be pro forma that we will be provided. You can get that from the CDA website, or design document, that photo using online diagram, interaction with the city holding entity if you get any property from the working on any property of the by city owned, experience with sealed bid, section 3 and Davis Bacon if applicable, description of any section 106 and or environmental assessment conducted if applicable, and CDA pro forma. The following additional item needed also in construction project prior to entering into the contract. Solidified buy-in from the city holding entity, design documents of any section 106 with environmental assessment, no construction or acquisition has taken place, and no procurement of general contractor has taken place unless the general contractor was requested in application when you submitted your application and that was approved by city. So these are the additional requirement. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. This was the last slide and question and answer.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot. Let's see here, stop share. And okay, we've made it through the first section. So we'll take a little break. I know that this has been a lot. This is very detailed. Are there any questions at this time? So you can use the Q&A or go ahead and just drop into the chat or raise your hand and we will bring you on and you can ask live. We still have one more section left to go on financial management. So if you have any questions about financial management of CDBG grants, maybe save those for the end. And it is 12:40, so something to consider, and I'll ask both the panelists and attendees for their opinion. Do we need to take a 5-minute break? Or do we want to keep going? I think we should keep going. Let's keep moving.
Yeah, better keep going.
Okay. Raul, you have your hand raised. We're bringing you in. And if you can unmute, you can ask a question live. Raul? Raul, we can't hear you if you're talking. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Raul, maybe put your question in the chat or in the Q&A. So we brought you in, your hand's raised, can't hear you. Oh, Raul, I can hear you. You there?
Yes, sir. 1 second, please.
Okay, we're ready for you. I hear you.
I thought you were gonna put it in there on there. What you want me to ask about your project?
Hey, Raul, we hear you.
With the forms.
Do you have a question?
The question only relates to a previous application that already had been submitted and was trying to
Okay,
find out the status of it.
Trying to see.
okay. Let's regroup later on that specific case, okay? Was it for housing production or for
Yes,
CDBG housing
Yes.
production? Okay, so
Uh,
those were
yes.
submitted exactly a month plus a day ago.
Yes.
So, and there were many, many, many. So we are evaluating those for eligibility right now. And the rating process will take some time. So hang in there. Last year, announcements were made in September, but we did, extend that deadline. So September, maybe October, but hang in there. We have a lot of applications, and to be very thorough, we're reviewing those carefully. So just hang in there, okay?
Yes, working
But
with
give us a call later today.
Oh, okay, sir.
Okay, thanks, Raul. Okay. Let's actually take 5 minutes for financial management. I believe we're going to bring in our finance team. So let me go walk around the office and see if they're ready. Colleen, is that correct? Okay, super. Okay. And please don't look at my cluttered desk. We'll go for it while I'm back. Oh, there's Brian. Hey, Brian, could you I'm going to rename you because you're called Noel Pfeffer right now. Brian, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, yeah, my name is Brian Yakum. I'm the fiscal manager here at CDA, and we are the main interaction you have with us is obviously payments, and just a reminder with CDA, your primary point of contact would always be with your program monitor, unless it's something specific to a payment or you've already submitted, or fiscal is requesting a response from you. But in general, if you got a concern, you should contact your program manager first. And if they want to forward that on to fiscal, then we'll be happy to handle it. But yeah, my name's Brian Yakum. I'm fiscal manager. Most of you will be interacting with Sharon Worth. And then we've also have 3 other accountants that handle the various payments. Latasha, Marquise, Raymond, and now Beyonda has joined us. And so, you'll be when your contract is executed, you will be assigned to one of the accountants. And then, Sharon and I will follow through and make sure everything is processed. And anyway, that's the basic financial setup. I'm the financial officer, Sharon's the manager, and then we have 4 accountants. And
Great, Brian. Are you ready to would you like to share the slide deck on your end, or would you like me to share it on my screen and just say next
you
slide?
share it on your screen, and then but I'm going to follow through these and just keep if I finish a slide, just move on to the next one.
Okay, great. Here we go.
Okay.
Let's start the final stretch of our program. And Brian, we are a little over. It's 12:45. We said we go to 1. So just so everyone knows, I have already posted these slides on the main page for the 2026 funding cycle. So where you're going to find that link to the portal on that page, I've already posted this slide deck. So Brian, I think that means we don't have to read every single thing on these. We can just kind of share the gist of them. And then folks, because this is very detailed, we probably expect you to go through the RFP and also probably download and read the slide deck at your own leisure. So we don't have to read everything, but probably just give the gist of each slide. So I believe my screen is shared. So Brian, you can go ahead and I'll hand you the microphone.
Okay. The the financial best practices. Our agenda today is really highlighting the main pieces that that HUD likes to enforce, and it really comes down to some general categories such as financial management, cash management, records, and your budgets. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through here and briefly
Could
talk.
you do next slide for just 1 minute? I have to pee.
I just did.
Yes. Just when he says next slide, you just
Tom, you might want to mute.
What are yours? Oh, here. Yep. And just click.
Yeah, there we go. That's good. So, the first one we'll talk about is financial management. And really, that's just a, it's something that's required by the federal government that you have a very strong accounting system. And there's certain things that must be in place in order to pass muster with the Fed's requirements. And
Yes, Tom.
and so really the key to financial management, it's a process of protecting and using federal funds accurately, efficiently, transparently in the way you're supposed to per the terms of your contract. And then it's important that federal law requires that you have a strong accounting system and you have a budget and various things such as that. And that's all designed to make sure that the funding is spent in the way that it was designed and intended per your contract. So they just want to ensure the integrity of the process and that everybody's on the same page. And like I say, you have to have a budget. And of course, we understand that that's an estimate in the beginning. And as long as you don't deviate from that in any material way, you should be fine. And keep in mind that you have an a monthly financial report to submit every month. And on that will be your budget. And that's how, there's a visual there that we can track. Both the agency and CDA together can track that you're following your budget and compliant with that. So that's those key systems or key components within the management system. Now, not every one of these may apply to you, but these are the key ones that are most common to everybody, and also the ones that they're reviewed more closely when we do a monitoring visit or something, or an audit as well. And the key components are your cost principles, budgets, procurement, internal controls, accounting records, your financial reporting, and then of course audits. So your cost principles, some key things to remember about these is, are they, allowed by your funding source? By that I means it's, what your objectives are per your contract, and anything you spend should be tied to achieving that objective. So, if there's ever any questions on should that be expended is that an eligible cost or whatever? It comes down to how does that help you achieve your program objectives? And so that's one of the key things is you want to know. And is it reasonable and necessary? I mean, if it's reasonable and but is it necessary to say that you go out and buy the most expensive item to help you achieve that function when a more basic expenditure, like you don't want to buy a Cadillac if you can get by with a small pickup truck, something like that, reasonable and necessary. And you also want to be sure that it's applicable to your specific funding source. And I think that would come down to something like if you have an expense that you can apply to say your whole office, but we only pay for one activity, and so is your invoice that or cost that you're charging us, is it really specific to just the program, and we're not covering the cost for your whole office when we only contracted with you to do one specific activity. Okay. Budgeting, let's go to budgeting. It's again, this is required by the federal government, and then you do submit a budget with your proposal. And this is a good estimate of how much you're going to spend to achieve the outputs that you think you desire to accomplish. And that and again, like on your monthly reports, your budget will be on there, and we'll be just tracking that as your program goes along, we're watching, are you timely performing your activities? And, if so, we don't have to come bugging you to find out why you're not performing. But, just remember that your budget is looked at on a monthly financial report. And again, when you submit your financial report, we look at that budget, look at your expenditures, and if you fail or accidentally forget to send us your financial report, we won't process the payment until we have that financial report. So keep in mind that every month you're going to have two reports, a program side report and then a financial side. And for the per unit ones, we look at both, and in both the program and the fiscal side sign off on it before we reimburse you for any per unit cost. And the other thing is, you just want to make sure that with your budget, if you commit some funds to a contract, that you show that like it is an encumbrance so that you don't overspend down the road. So there's a good reason to have a budget and to follow it. Procurement. Just keep in mind the magic number is $10,000. If you're going to exceed spending with one vendor over the course of your contract by $10,000,
Come get us.
for $10,000, if you're going to spend more than that, you need to get approval from CDA. And that means, say that you buy office supplies and in the course of the year, you're going to exceed $10,000. Make sure you touch base with your program monitor, because once you hit 10,000, you're going to be stopped for reimbursement unless you've been approved for more than that. And your procurement, you're going to have to get bids. Just make sure they're fair and open about it, and you keep all the documentation about who submitted bids, what their proposal were, and everything, so we can go through and make sure you made a fair and open decision. Internal controls. Internal controls can be anything, but they're designed to prevent the misuse of funds or poor record keeping in judgments. I mean, it can be anything from a form during your intake it could be the requirement for at least 2 or 3 people sign off on expenditures or approval to expend. And you know, we just want the stronger your internal controls, the less errors you're going to have. So we look for internal controls to be a strong part of your management system. And accounting records, just make sure you keep accurate and up-to-date files, and you can readily access that information if you need. Financial reporting, again, that's how we use that to track you every month when you submit your monthly financial reports. And when you get your contract every year, before you sign it, the last few pages will be a copy of the financial report you have to fill out every month, and also your programmatic report. So you'll see what those reports are at the time you are signing your contract. So, cash management, the reimbursement of funds, that's what everybody's interested in once they sign the contract. But direct reimbursement is, we reimburse you for your actual cost, and you will submit actual invoices in those cases. Then the other piece is the fixed price unit, and that's a per unit cost. You've agreed to that rate, and you on your programmatic side, you're tracking the number of units, and then you multiply that for that month times the per unit cost, and that's your reimbursement. And just remember, on the monthly financial, you do have to track at the end of the year, your expenditures cannot be less than what we reimbursed you. So, you do have to track on your monthly financial report your actual expenses. And we come out once a year to do a monitoring visit. We're going to be taking a look at those expenses. So, we might do something as simple as look at 1 month, you declared certain expenses. We want to see your documentation for those. But the key is, your expenditures have to be at least as much as what we reimbursed you for. Allowable cost, kind of common sense. It comes back to this reasonable and necessary, and it was specifically to achieve your program objectives as they're listed in the contract. And this is really a repeat of some of the things I've said already. It's a recap here. And but just in mind, is it when you not sure if it's eligible, is it reasonable and necessary to achieve your program objectives? That's the main clue. And then it's got to be consistent in your treatment of things. And when I say that, consistent in your treatment, for accounting purposes, if you have multiple funding sources, and GAAP says, on all of your reporting, you have to treat everything the same way. And a simple explanation would be, say, depreciation expense. If you were going to depreciate something, you have to use the same depreciation expenses for all your funding sources. You can't use one for block grant, one for money you might get from a foundation, and another depreciation method for your own funding. So, I mean, you just have to be consistent in your treatment of your expenses and revenues. Allowable, again, that's reasonable and necessary. And, if a prudent person, really, I say, is it, would I spend my own money on that? That's the way I sometimes look at it. That might not be accurate. And, but it's got to be reasonable and necessary for to achieve the objectives. And then the other thing is, you want to make sure when you're doing procurement that, like, the people you're getting bids from, is it your grandparents' business that you want to buy the supplies from, stuff like that. You have to have an arm's length bargaining. If you're going to buy something from somebody that's in business that's, you know, they can't be on your board, or they can't be, you know, just friends or neighbors. We look at some of your vendors, and you know, that's just, again, common sense. And that's one of the things we look at as well when we review procurement. Let's see. If allowable, some allowed, that's common sense, whether it's not allowable, you know, like, that means it's not really related, reasonable and necessary for the, to achieve your objectives, and you can just read through that, and I don't need to go through them one at a time. And accounting records, and you know, again, there's some main things that we list, like chart of accounts, cash receipts journal, payroll journal, general ledger. In your particular agency might not have all of these, but it's as long as it's you know, you can track your revenues coming in and your expenses going out, and you got to track it specific to your contract or your activity, and that can be, like, say, by account, or fund, or you might have a certain code, like, for each contract. If you got a 10-digit number, you might have a code that ties it to a specific contract. So if you need to pull up expenses just for your contract, it's easy to pull out of the system. And same with the revenues. You might have just one account specific to block grant revenue, another account for donations, and track it that way. But you got to be able to track it by source and tie it to your grant that you receive from CDA. And charged against, you know, the key things about expenses, and when you tie it to your contract, if you have to purchase something, do you have an approval process in your agency? Generally, at least two people have to sign off on it. One person can't control the whole process. That way, you know, it helps ensure efficient and accurate spending of money. And you also have to keep documentation. Any payments you make, just make sure you have on file invoices. And did you incur the expenses during the period of the contract? Most of you, your contracts are January through December. Did you purchase it before the contract was executed? That's a no-no. And once the contract ends in December, you should not be purchasing anything. If your invoice has got to specifically state that it was work done in December, or work, you got to be able to show that you incurred the cost during the period, the eligible period of your contract, the period of performance. Just types of costs. Most common to the programs that we fund, obviously personnel. So, you know, there's a method of submitting and record keeping, and keep in mind the most important is probably payroll registers and timesheets, and then also proof that you paid your taxes, whether to the federal, state, or local government, for withholdings. Local travel, don't do. If you do mileage, you must do it by odometer readings, and submit mileage. And you know, the rate changes every year. I think now it's 67 cents a mile. And you know, professional services, again, touch base with your program monitor, because you're going to need procurement for these. And if it's 10,000 or more, for sure. If it's 10,000, if it's less than 10,000, you really got to keep bids and keep records, but you don't have to get prior approval from CDA. Only if it exceeds 10,000, or equal to 10,000. Same goes for supplies and equipment. And the equipment, a lot of equipment is not allowable. So if you're going to purchase equipment, make sure you touch base with your program monitor. And insurance and each insurance is different. Again, if insurance can sometimes apply to your whole office, but you can only claim what's applicable to your award, your funding source for CDA. So make sure you understand that. And just the key thing is you want your records to be up to date. So you got to do your monthly reports. And hopefully when you submit your monthly reports, you got that off of your general ledger and everything's been entered into your accounting system at that time. And that slide, it's page 143. It's related to fund accounting, and part of the federal government, when they say they want certain information in your accounting system, and that's the amount of your award, what you're currently authorized to spend. In other words, you might have a personnel schedule where you commit a certain amount to payroll, and then you might have a professional service agreement. So you're going to tie up all that money. You want that in your system, so it just tells you how much you have not committed, so that down the road, if something comes up, you got to run down and purchase something, you're not going to exceed your budget. So just that's the nice thing about budgeting and submitting that information on a monthly basis. And I just think on your financial reporting, make sure you keep your documentation and make it your filing system in a way that you can, if we come in and want to take a look at a certain month's activity, that you can pull the invoices or pull timesheets or whatever is necessary. Then we got different types of activities, and like some of the documentation is different for each, but just go through and look at what's applicable to you. Administrative, it's going to be mostly payroll and professional services or supplies. So you're going to have procurement or personnel schedules. Make sure they're current. And if you hire new people to be funded by our programs, make sure you touch base with your program monitor. Construction activities, you submit those in your program side, and you're going to have to make sure your labor standards, Section 3, and minority reporting and all, really mainly your labor standards and Section 3 are up to date. So you want to touch base with just make sure all that's up to date. And when your payment come in, it might take a week or so for us to review. So just make sure you have that stuff up to date. The home repair, I mean, that's just a list of what you need to submit with each request. I'll let you read through that. It's common sense. The scope of work, and you got a contract between the homeowner and the contractor. There is a deed of trust, just for the amount of the award, to make sure that you're compliant and for a certain number of years. And the payout order is something that's signed by the homeowner and someone that's inspecting it to help oversee it. That's to ensure that the work was done and people are satisfied before we make a payment. Minor home repair, it's about eligibility to people. You have to be 62 and older to be eligible, or with a disability. And so we're going to ask for proof of that and proof of income and home ownership. And then somebody will indicate that the work was finished, so then we can pay it. Economic development activities, these generally come to be large dollar amounts, and everything is approved along the way. So, you're working closely with your program monitor. I'm not going to go over each one of these because you do have to get prior approval on all these before they're expended. And public service, again, there's Most of these are per unit based, and that's decided in your proposal and your final contract on what the rate's going to be, and then you track it on your programmatic reports, and then we go from there. I think that's you know, yeah. A lot of this stuff is I don't want to repeat myself too many times, but it comes down to your grant reimbursement. Are you a per unit or you're a direct reimbursement? And then are you within your budget, within reason? And you have your direct cost, and then you have your indirect cost. If you're planning on doing indirect cost, make sure you have what they call a modified total direct cost schedule prepared, and it's got to be approved by CDA before we generally approve the indirect cost rate. And it's going up to 15%. That's if you don't have a negotiated rate with the feds, and so be sure you check with us, because it can be, for those of you that don't have a large accounting section and you're not familiar with the term indirect costs, it can be confusing. So if you're gonna, just make sure you touch base with us before you start requesting that for reimbursement. And again, you have your monthly reports, and without your monthly reports are up to date, we cannot process your payments. So they go hand in hand, and those are the basic requirements that we require. So I think that's where I'll leave it off at this point. On it's kind of common sense. Once you set your budget, set your reimbursement rate, and you know what your output, what you want to accomplish are, and then the contract should come together, and your proposal should come together, and then if you're selected, with the contract to go from there. So Tom, unless there's any questions, I don't really have any further comment.
Great, Brian. Thank you so much for taking us all the way to the conclusion of this webinar. Turn my camera back on here. So now is our time for questions and answers. I apologize. We know this is very detailed, and therefore we went long, and it's 1:15. So thank you everyone for your patience. Thank you everyone for your interest in joining this webinar. I see hands raised, so we'll try and bring in Raul. As your hand is raised, did you want to ask a question? If you unmute, you can ask it live. And then everyone, you can get into the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll answer your questions.
Okay, the question Mr. Holman would like to ask is, what are some of the systems, the accounting systems that are acceptable? Like, is Stripe acceptable? ADP for employee payroll, PeopleSoft, some of those software products. Are you familiar with any of those?
Brian, is there a accounting software that you recommend that grantees use? Do you have a favorite?
No, not really. I mean, we can't dictate what systems they use or recommend, and we can't. Most people report on an accrual basis, and we can't even require that. You can report on a cash basis, but really, most of those software programs with the building controls, you're going to be compliant with what the federal government wants. So most of those software programs that are mainstream are all good. And you know, we don't have a preference. If you use a cash basis of accounting, you have to have a mechanism to convert your reporting to the accrual basis, say at your year-end process or whatever. But other than that, you know, you pick your own software, and like I say, all these programs, CAN programs, are usually compliant with the federal government requirements.
Great, Raul. So it just sounds like whatever works for you and can produce reports that will be compliant with CDA. And then, I'll just note that what Brian went through is, I think, just some kind of level setting so people are aware before they apply that if you are granted, just to be aware that the reporting requirements are pretty are rather involved because we are stewards of you, the taxpayers, federal funds, and investing them into St. Louis. I don't see any questions in the chat. I see folks have used this Q&A. I'll remind everyone that this is your time to ask us questions. So we're here. So raise your hand, get into the Q&A, get into the chat. After this meeting, we will take all the questions asked here and publish those answers on that main webpage for CDBG 2026. So you'll be able to look at a PDF that shows all of the questions and all the answers, and that keeps this funding cycle competitive and fair. But now is your time if you want to speak live to ask questions. So Raul, you have your hand raised again. I'll bring you back in if you can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, we are. I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Holman. He's right here.
I think there's an echo. Are you using two devices in there? If you could just turn one off.
Okay, thank you.
That's better.
Okay, we are. You can mute me now.
That would hurt.
Colleen, Raul, I still have that echo. Maybe no.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and just write it down in the chat?
Okay, is that better?
It's a little better. Maybe just say really fast and ignore it, and I'll try and hear you.
Okay, for the rental housing, affordable housing.
I could barely hear it, but you're asking about affordable housing?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the question? Okay. Maybe could you?
We'll put it in the questions and answers. We got an echo on our end.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's been a long meeting, and we're at 1:19, about 20 minutes over. So this is your time to ask questions. If you want to raise your hand, we have the group of grant managers and monitors here to assist you. So if you have questions, go ahead and just throw them here in the chat or raise your hand. Okay. CDA staff on the call, is there anything you'd like to share before I go ahead and let everyone continue the rest of their Friday afternoon?
We're good. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining and hanging in. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for all you do for the St. Louis community and the St. Louis region and your commitment to service and fellow residents. So thank you for joining us today to learn more. And we do hope you apply, and we hope this was helpful for you. Thank you, CDA staff, for your hard work putting this webinar together for our applicants.
Thank
And so the slides that you saw today are up on that main webpage for CDBG 2026, and we are streaming live on YouTube, and a link to this recording is up already on that main webpage for CDBG 2026. And I'll say it again, my favorite reminder is go to CDA's main webpage, stlouis-mo.gov/CDA. And right there, you can sign up for our email newsletter. So thank you for subscribing. If you already receive it, go ahead and copy and paste your coworkers' emails and go ahead and subscribe them as well. That is the best way to get announcements and news from CDA about funding opportunities and news about our partners. So with that, thank you, STL TV, as always, for facilitating this meeting and getting us live and online. And thank you, St. Louis. Thank you, residents, for attending today. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful weekend and stay cool.